Picture this, it's the late 1990s. The internet boom is in full swing. Investors are throwing money at anything with a .com in its name, and startups are promising to change everything about how we live, work, and shop. In this feverish moment, one idea stood out above all others: the notion that people would stop going to grocery stores and instead have their groceries delivered right to their doorstep, quickly and efficiently, with a few clicks. It sounds normal now, right? Companies like Instacart, Amazon Fresh, and even ultra-fast delivery brands in the 2020s make grocery delivery feel like a no-brainer. But back then, this concept was so radical that one company raised hundreds of millions of dollars and built an empire that collapsed spectacularly, burning through around $800 million in the process. What started as one of the boldest bets on the future of retail turned into a lesson that still haunts entrepreneurs and investors today. This is the story of Webvan, a brand that was never truly built to last, even though it looked like a genius idea at the time. Reinventing how we shop. Back in 1996, the founders of Webvan looked at the traditional grocery business and saw inefficiency. Long lines, crowded aisles, heavy bags, all part of daily life. What if groceries could be ordered online? What if a customer could choose a delivery window and have fresh produce, meats, and pantry staples show up at their doorstep like magic? That was the pitch. And in the late 1990s, that pitch was irresistible to investors. Webvan offered something that sounded futuristic, convenient, and aligned with the way the internet was already shaping travel bookings, music purchases, and stock trading online. Venture capital poured in. At its peak, the company had raised an astonishing amount of venture funding and was positioned as one of the most exciting startups in the .com world. But here's the thing. Raising money and building infrastructure are not the same as building a sustainable business. And that's where Webvan's downfall began. Too much too fast. You've probably heard the phrase, scale or fail. That was Webvan's mantra, the belief that rapid expansion was the path to dominance. But in trying to scale too fast, Webvan made choices that would eventually become its undoing. Instead of testing its model in one or two markets and refining operations, Webvan expanded aggressively into multiple cities at once. It didn't just set up delivery networks, it built gigantic automated warehouses designed specifically for its business. These were not simple storage facilities. They were highly sophisticated distribution centers with conveyor belts, refrigeration systems, and technology that cost hundreds of millions to build. And there was no proven reason to believe that customers were ready for this at scale. This wasn't launching a new app or a lean software product. This was building an entirely new physical infrastructure, warehouses, trucks, logistics systems, technology platforms in dozens of cities simultaneously. The assumption was that customers would flock to the service, orders would skyrocket, and economies of scale would kick in. But reality had other plans. The market reality, not ready for the dream. Webvan's concept seemed obvious in hindsight, but in the late 90s and early 2000s, consumer behavior had not yet caught up with the idea of shopping for groceries online. People weren't yet comfortable buying perishable items, much less trusting that produce would arrive fresh, or that delicate items wouldn't spoil en route. Grocery shopping was a routine, habit-based activity, and the infrastructure for same-day logistics in household goods simply didn't exist outside of what individual supermarkets could offer. By the time Webvan was fully operational in multiple cities, the company had already sunk massive capital into warehouse systems that were hundreds of millions of dollars to build, long-term leases it couldn't easily exit, and a team that cost millions in salaries and overhead. Customers didn't come in the numbers needed to justify this investment, and as orders lagged behind expectations, the burn rate became unsustainable. What happened next? At its peak, Webvan had a massive footprint, thousands of customers in its service areas, and the kind of brand buzz that companies dream about. But all of that couldn't mask the financial reality. With a burn rate fueled by expensive facilities, heavy operational costs, and a business model that wasn't bringing in enough revenue, the company's runway disappeared quickly. Investors, once thrilled, began worrying, and in 2001, after just 3 years of operation, Webvan filed for bankruptcy, laying off thousands of employees and shuttering operations. That 800 million plus investment, nearly unheard of in those days, was essentially wiped out. And while Webvan's assets and ideas didn't completely disappear, in later years, Amazon bought parts of the business and others learned lessons from its model. The original brand and its ambitions were gone. Why it was never built to last. What fascinates people about Webvan's story isn't just the scale of the collapse. It's the disconnect between vision and execution, the belief that having a revolutionary idea was all that mattered. There are several key reasons Webvan was never built to last. 1. Misreading customer readiness. At the time, groceries were one of the last bastions of in-person shopping. Unlike airline tickets or music, where consumers were already comfortable going digital, groceries required trust in freshness, reliability, and quality. That trust wasn't there yet too. Uncontrolled expansion. Webvan tried to be in too many markets too fast. Instead of perfecting at small scale, it built costly infrastructure across cities. A bet that demand would quickly follow, which it did not. 3. Infrastructure overload. Rather than relying on partnerships with existing grocery supply chains, Webvan built everything itself. Warehouses, delivery fleets, technology platforms, creating huge fixed costs without the revenue to support them. 4. Hype and investor pressure. Like many dot-com-era startups, Webvan was propelled by investor excitement and a belief that rapid growth was the path to eventual profitability. But scale without a validated business model is just expensive activity, not sustainable growth. The lessons that still matter today. When companies talk about disruption and reinventing industries, analysts often point back to Webvan as a cautionary tale, not because the idea was wrong, but because the timing, assumptions, and fundamentals were off. Here's what business leaders and founders can learn. Lesson: fuzz and validate before you build out. You can have a visionary idea, but you must validate it with real customers before investing hundreds of millions, especially in physical infrastructure that's hard to unwind. Lesson 2a. Scale only after you prove the model. Rapid expansion only amplifies mistakes. Proven product market fit in one geography or demographic is critical before you go nationwide or global. Lesson 3z. Keep fixed costs manageable. One of Webvan's biggest Achilles heels was its massive overhead. Flexible, asset-light models tend to weather early growth stages better, especially when customer demand is unproven. Lesson 4. Customer behavior can be slow to change. Even if an idea makes sense, customers may not adopt it as quickly as investors hope. Timing matters as much as innovation. What about today? Now here's the twist: the underlying idea Webvan championed, online grocery delivery, is mainstream. Companies like Instacart, Amazon Fresh, and even supermarket chains with delivery and pickup services are thriving. The difference? They built on existing supply chains, partnered with established grocery sellers, and grew as customer habits shifted. They didn't assume one giant infrastructure build-out would solve every problem overnight. Instead, they iterated, tested, partnered, and scaled only after demand proved strong. And this contrast is what makes Webvan's story so fascinating. It's not that the idea was flawed. It worked, just not in the way or timeline that Webvan anticipated. A reality check most startups don't get. If you asked a room full of entrepreneurs what the biggest challenge in business is, many would say raising money. But in reality, raising money is the easy part. The hard part is building a company that sustains itself, creating a business where revenue exceeds costs, customers pay enough for value, and operations can adapt as the market evolves. Webvan did everything investors loved: ambitious ideas, massive funding, bold expansion, and revolutionary branding. But it skipped the most important part of business success: a business that makes more than it spends consistently. Without that, even the most visionary startup can burn through hundreds of millions and disappear. So what happens to companies like this? When a company collapses like Webvan did, the immediate story is financial loss. Thousands of employees lose jobs. Investors lose money. The brand becomes shorthand for failure. But the long-term legacy is different. Webvan's story became a blueprint, a cautionary tale in business schools, startup accelerators, and boardrooms. Its failures taught future companies to be smarter about validating demand, managing growth, understanding customer behavior, building flexible, scalable models. In fact, you could argue that modern online grocery delivery models wouldn't exist in their current form if Webvan hadn't tried and failed first. Its lessons shaped the strategies of companies that succeeded later. And here is something to think about. When you look at the most talked about startups and tech brands today, from AI platforms to delivery services to digital marketplaces, ask yourself one question. Are they building something real, or are they just chasing a better story? Because the market and real customers always tell the truth eventually. And that's the legacy of Webvan, not a failed idea, but a reminder that execution, timing, customer readiness, and sustainable economic models are what turn ideas into companies that last. Now let me ask you this. Which modern company today might be repeating the same mistakes Webvan did? Overhyped, overbuilt, and not ready for real customer demand? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's get the conversation going.